The bell above the door of Antonio's diner chimed its soft, tinny song, but the man who stepped through seemed to silence it. The evening air, warm and smelling of garlic and baking bread, grew still. Caroline, balancing 3 heavy plates along her arm, felt the shift before she saw the cause. He was there again. The man in the dark, expensive-looking coat. For 2 weeks, he had been her mystery. He arrived like clockwork just as the sun began to dip below the city skyline, claiming the same shadowy booth in the corner. He never spoke beyond ordering a black coffee and the evening special. He never smiled. He would pull a sleek laptop from his leather bag, his long, elegant fingers tapping silently, his presence casting a chill over his small section of the warm, noisy restaurant. The other waitresses called him the ghost and gave his table a wide berth. But Caroline was different. She was a dreamer, and in the quiet, serious man, she saw a story she desperately wanted to read. Tonight, the restaurant was a whirlwind of clattering dishes and laughing families. Caroline, her feet aching, navigated the chaos with a practiced smile. Her eyes, however, kept drifting back to the corner. He was staring out the window, his profile sharp and thoughtful, as if he were a king surveying a kingdom that bored him. A single lock of dark hair had fallen across his forehead, and for a foolish second, she thought about brushing it back. Shaking her head at her own silliness, she picked up a pitcher of iced water to refill drinks. That's when it happened. The inciting incident was not a grand crash or a dramatic scene, but a simple, clumsy moment. As she moved past his table, her hip bumped the edge, just enough to jostle her arm. A wave of cold water sloshed from the pitcher, cascading over the rim and onto his table, splashing his sleeve and the polished screen of his laptop. Time froze. Caroline's heart plummeted into her stomach. "Oh, I am so sorry," she gasped, her voice trembling. She grabbed a stack of napkins from a nearby station, her hands moving in a frantic, panicked dance. "I'm so clumsy. I didn't see. I'm so sorry, sir." She expected cold anger. A sharp word. A demand for the manager. This laptop probably cost more than she made in a month. Her cheeks burned with humiliation. But the anger never came. Instead, a large, warm hand gently covered her fluttering ones, stilling them. The contact was like a jolt of electricity. Her eyes snapped up to meet his. He wasn't looking at the mess. He wasn't looking at his wet sleeve. He was looking directly at her. His eyes were a deep, stormy gray, and in them, she saw not annoyance, but a startling intensity. It was a look that saw right through her uniform and her apology, straight into the very core of her. It was a look that held her captive. "It's just water," he said, his voice a low, quiet rumble that seemed to vibrate in the space between them. It was a voice meant for dark rooms and secrets. "But your laptop," she whispered, her own voice barely audible. "Is fine," he assured her, his thumb making a subtle, unconscious stroke against the back of her hand before he pulled away. The spot where his skin had touched hers tingled. He took a napkin from her frozen grasp and calmly dabbed at his sleeve. His gaze never left her face. "It's you I'm concerned about. You're working too hard." No customer had ever said anything like that to her. They complained about slow service or cold food. They didn't notice the person serving them. Yet, in the middle of his own minor disaster, he had noticed her. A strange, warm courage bubbled up inside her. She offered him a smile, a real one this time, not the polite, professional one she gave all the other customers. It was a smile that lit up her whole face, reaching her eyes. "It's my job to work hard," she said, her voice steadier now. "But thank you." Something flickered in those stormy depths of his eyes. It was like lightning in a distant cloud, a quick, bright flash of surprise, and something hotter, something far more dangerous. It was a look of pure, unguarded attraction. It lasted only a second before a wall slammed down behind his eyes, but she had seen it. She had felt it. He stood up abruptly, pulling a few bills from his wallet and placing them on the table, far more than enough to cover his meal. "I should go," he said, his voice now tight, as if he were fighting with himself. Caroline could only nod, her mind still reeling from that single, electric glance. He walked towards the door, his tall frame moving with a powerful, controlled grace. The other diners seemed to fade into a blur around him. Her heart was pounding a wild, frantic rhythm against her ribs. She didn't want him to leave. She wanted to run after him, to ask his name, to ask what that look had meant. As if he had heard her silent plea, he stopped just as his hand touched the door handle. He turned back. His eyes found hers across the crowded room, and it felt as if they were the only two people in the world. The noise, the smells, the lights, everything melted away, leaving only the magnetic pull between them. He took 2 slow steps back towards her, close enough that she could smell the faint, clean scent of his cologne, like sandalwood and rain. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a husky, intimate whisper meant only for her ears. The words were a caress and a warning, all rolled into one. "You have a light inside you," he murmured, his eyes tracing the line of her jaw. "It's the most beautiful thing I've seen in a long, long time." He paused, and the air grew thick with unspoken feeling. "And that is exactly why you should stay away from me. A man like me, I wasn't made for light. I would only end up burning you." He didn't wait for a reply. He turned and walked out the door, disappearing into the twilight. Caroline stood rooted to the spot, the damp cloth still clutched in her hand. Fear should have been her first reaction. A normal person would have been frightened by such a strange and dramatic warning. But Caroline wasn't frightened. His words, meant to push her away, had done the opposite. They had drawn her in. They were a challenge. A mystery. A forbidden door he had just dared her to open. "Or you," she thought, her gaze fixed on the empty doorway. And what happens when a man who lives in the dark finds himself craving the light? The thrill that shot through her was as undeniable as it was dangerous. He thought he could control the pull between them. He thought a warning would be enough. But as Caroline felt the lingering warmth on her hand and the ghost of his whisper in her ear, she knew with a certainty that shook her to her soul that he was wrong. This was only the beginning. The warning should have built a wall between them. Instead, it built a bridge, one made of stolen glances and charged silence. For 3 days, Frederick did not return to the restaurant. Caroline moved through her shifts like a ghost herself, her eyes constantly darting to the empty corner booth, her heart sinking a little more with each passing hour. Had his control won? Had he successfully talked himself out of the temptation she represented? On the 4th evening, the bell chimed. Caroline's head snapped up from wiping a table, her breath catching in her throat. There he was. He looked the same, dark coat, serious expression, but everything was different. This time, his stormy eyes found hers the moment he stepped inside, holding her gaze with a deliberate, unflinching intensity as he walked to his table. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was there for her. He came every night after that. He never said much, but his presence was a constant, humming energy in the room. He would order his coffee, and when she brought it, his fingers would deliberately brush against hers as he took the cup. A simple touch, but it sent sparks shooting up her arm. He left extravagant tips, folded notes with them. They weren't love letters. One night, it was just a sketch of the moon. Another, a single word. Soon. The tension between them became a living thing, thickening the air, making it hard to breathe. It was a silent game of push and pull, and Caroline was utterly captivated. The breaking point came on a Friday. The restaurant was closed, the chairs upturned on the tables. Caroline was exhausted, counting the till when a soft knock echoed through the quiet dining room. Her heart leaped. She knew, with a certainty that defied logic, who it was. Frederick stood under the flickering street lamp, his hands buried in his coat pockets. The rain from earlier had left the pavement glistening, reflecting the city lights like 1,000 scattered stars. "My car is around the corner," he said, his voice low and steady, no trace of a question in it. It was an invitation, a statement of fact. "Walk with me." She should have said no. She should have cited policy, or safety, or simple common sense. Instead, she simply nodded, grabbed her coat, and turned off the lights, stepping out into the cool night to meet her fate. They didn't take his car. They walked. For hours, they wandered through the sleeping city, through parks where the only sound was the rustle of leaves and their own footsteps. The invisible wall between them crumbled with every shared confession. He told her about the family business, a world of old money, suffocating traditions, and a future that had been mapped out for him since birth, a future that felt like a gilded cage. "They have a list," he said, a bitter edge to his voice. "The right families. The right connections. My life is not my own. It's a transaction." In return, she told him about her dreams that stretched far beyond the restaurant walls, about the small journal she kept filled with stories of places she wanted to see, and a life filled with genuine feeling, not just duty. "You're so free," he murmured, looking at her with a kind of awe. "You have no idea what a miracle that is." Their hands, swinging at their sides, brushed together. This time, he didn't pull away. His fingers laced with hers, strong and sure, and it felt like coming home. The simple act of holding hands had never felt so intimate, so scandalous, so right. He led her to a small, hidden garden, a secret pocket of beauty tucked between two old buildings. The moon, full and bright, bathed everything in a silvery light. They stopped beside a stone fountain, the gentle trickle of water the only sound. "Caroline," he whispered, his voice rough with an emotion she could now name longing. He lifted his free hand and gently cupped her cheek, his thumb stroking her skin. His touch was impossibly warm, sending shivers through her entire body. She leaned into his palm, her eyes fluttering closed for a brief second. "I tried," he said, his face so close she could feel his breath on her lips. "God, I tried to stay away. I told myself it was for your own good. But I can't. I can't control myself around you. You are all I think about." That was all the permission she needed. She rose onto her toes, closing the small, breathless space between them. Their first kiss was not gentle or hesitant. It was a collision, a release of all the weeks of tension, all the stolen glances, all the unspoken words. It was a kiss full of fire and longing, a desperate claiming. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her flush against his solid frame, and she melted into him. One of his hands slid from her back to tangle in her hair, tilting her head to deepen the kiss, while the other splayed firmly against the small of her back, holding her possessively close. It was spicy and deep, a kiss that spoke of lonely nights and a desperate, shared hunger. It tasted of coffee, of rain, and of pure, undiluted want. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. He rested his forehead against hers, his eyes dark and blazing with an intensity that made her knees weak. "This is a secret," he breathed, his voice husky. "My world, they can't know about you. You would become a target, a weakness they would try to remove." Instead of frightening her, his protectiveness ignited a fierce warmth in her chest. "Then it will be our secret," she whispered back, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. And so, their secret, intense romance began. It was a world built in the shadows. Late-night drives in his luxurious car, windows down, her hand in his. Passionate, breathless kisses in elevator cars, believing for a few stolen seconds they were utterly alone. He would wait for her in his car down the street from the restaurant, a silent, powerful sentinel. She would slip inside, and he would drive them to a quiet lookout point over the city. There, they would talk for hours, but more often, they would simply touch, exploring this new, intoxicating language of their bodies. His hands learned the curve of her waist, the slope of her neck. Her fingers traced the strong line of his shoulders, the surprising softness of his hair. Every embrace was warmer, every kiss was longer and more daring than the last. The electricity that had sparked between them from the very first day now crackled constantly, a live wire of desire and deep, growing affection. He was a man used to commanding everything in his life, but with her, he was learning to surrender. And she, a girl who followed the rules, was learning the thrilling power of breaking them for a love that felt once in a lifetime. He was her dangerous secret, and she was his stolen, precious light. And in the dark, away from prying eyes, they both knew they were falling, fast and hard, with no thought of ever finding their way back up. The secret world Caroline and Frederick had built began to feel the pressure of the real one. It started subtly. Frederick's phone would buzz with a specific, harsh tone during their late-night drives, and he would let it go to voicemail, his jaw tightening. The shadows under his eyes deepened. During one of their embraces in the quiet of his car, she felt him flinch, and when she pulled back, she saw a new worry in his beautiful, stormy eyes. "They're insisting I attend more functions," he finally confessed one evening, his voice tight. They were parked at their usual spot, the city lights twinkling far below like a bed of diamonds. He stared straight ahead, his hands gripping the steering wheel. "Galas. Dinners. They're presenting me with potential partners. Women from suitable families." The word partners struck Caroline's heart like a physical blow. She had known this was coming, but hearing it aloud made it terrifyingly real. The gilded cage he described was rattling its bars, demanding its occupant return. "What did you tell them?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He turned to her then, his gaze fierce. "I told them I wasn't interested. But it's not a request, Karen. It's an expectation. To them, my life is a business merger. My happiness is irrelevant." For the next week, a cloud hung over them. Their kisses became more desperate, their holds tighter, as if they were both trying to memorize the feel of the other before it was ripped away. Caroline could feel him being pulled away, tugged by the invisible strings of duty and a last name that felt more like a chain. The fear was a constant, cold knot in her stomach. Was their beautiful, secret love story destined to be a tragic one? Then, one Tuesday night, he was waiting for her after her shift, but he wasn't in the car. He was standing by the passenger door, a single long-stemmed white lily in his hand. His expression was different. The worry was gone, replaced by a calm, unshakable resolve. "Get in," he said, a small, sure smile playing on his lips. "We're not going to our usual spot." He drove out of the city, the buildings giving way to rolling hills and a sky crowded with stars. He was quiet, but his hand rested on her knee, his thumb drawing slow, calming circles. He wasn't pulling away, he was leading her somewhere. Finally, he turned down a narrow, tree-lined lane, stopping before an ornate, wrought iron gate. He entered a code, and the gates swung open silently, revealing a breathtaking, private garden. It was a hidden paradise. Moonlight dripped from the petals of blooming night-blooming jasmine, filling the air with an intoxicating sweetness. A path of smooth, white stones led to a gazebo draped in wisteria, and a small, crystal-clear pond reflected the full moon like a perfect pearl. It was a world away from everything, from the noisy restaurant, from the pressures of his family, from all the shadows. He led her to the center of the garden, under an ancient, sprawling oak tree. The only sounds were the chirping of crickets and the frantic beating of her own heart. He turned to face her, taking both of her hands in his. His eyes, in the moonlight, were pure silver, blazing with a love so raw and powerful it stole her breath. "For my entire life," he began, his voice strong and clear, "I have been told who to be. My path was laid out for me before I could walk. I was taught to control everything, especially my heart. I was told emotion was a weakness." He brought her hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles, his gaze never leaving hers. "And then I met you. A waitress who wasn't afraid of a brooding stranger. A woman with a smile that could power cities and a spirit so bright it burned away all the gray in my world." Tears welled in Caroline's eyes, glistening in the moonlight. "You were the one thing I could never control," he continued, a hint of that old, delicious danger in his voice. "My love for you was an explosion. It was messy and overwhelming and the most real thing I have ever known. You didn't just walk into my life, Caroline. You stormed it. You laid claim to a heart I didn't even know was still beating." He let go of her hands and slowly, reverently, lowered himself to one knee. From his pocket he pulled out a small, black velvet box. When he opened it, Caroline's breath hitched. Nestled inside was a stunning, elegant diamond ring that sparkled with a fierce, brilliant fire. "They can have the business," Frederick said, his voice thick with emotion. "They can have the name, the money, the empty legacy. It all means nothing. You are my freedom. You are my future. I choose you, and only you, forever." He looked up at her, his entire soul laid bare in his eyes. "Caroline, my love, my light, Will you marry me? Will you leave this old life behind and build a new world with me? A world that belongs only to us. There were no words. There was only a feeling, a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated joy that washed away every fear, every doubt. She dropped to her knees in front of him, her hands cradling his face. Yes, she breathed the word, a promise, a prayer, a new beginning. 1,000 times yes. The kiss they shared then was different from all the others. It wasn't a kiss of stolen passion or desperate longing. It was a seal, a vow. It was soft and deep and filled with the profound, unshakable peace of two souls who had finally, completely come home. He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had always been meant to be there. As they held each other under the starlit sky, wrapped in an embrace that promised a lifetime of tomorrows, the last of the shadows melted away. He had chosen her. Not duty, not tradition, but her. And in doing so, he had given them both the greatest adventure of all, a forever, built not on a name, but on a love so powerful it had rewritten both their destinies. We hope you were captivated by Caroline and Frederick's unforgettable love story. If this tale of a powerful man brought to his knees by love captured your heart, then imagine the other romances waiting for you. Subscribe to our channel now, and never miss a story where passion defies all odds. Their forever started with a choice. What would you have chosen? Let us know where in the world you're watching from and share your thoughts on their dramatic, spicy romance in the comments below. We love reading every single one.